Right now, you are participating in the most expensive, most exhausting, and most structurally flawed economic experiment in human history. And you probably just call it a Tuesday. You know the exact moment I am talking about. The baby is screaming in the next room. There is a half-written work email glowing on your laptop, demanding your immediate attention. You are trying to stir a meal on the stove with one single, exhausted hand. And somewhere, ticking quietly, relentlessly in the background of your life, is an invisible meter. It is running up a staggering, compounding financial bill that threatens to paralyze you for the next 2 decades. Tick. That is the cost of morning daycare. Tick. That is the premium formula because your body was too stressed to produce. Tick. That is the desperate, middle-of-the-night purchase of a sleep consultant because you are actively hallucinating from exhaustion. Every single second you are awake, you are spending money just to keep your head above water. You are drowning. And the worst part is, you look in the mirror and you think it is your fault. You scroll through perfectly curated feeds of smiling parents who seem to have endless energy, organic snacks, and flawlessly sleep-trained infants. You look at your own depleted bank account, your own frayed patience, your own messy living room, and you internalize the blame. You tell yourself that if you just managed your time better, if you just woke up a little earlier, if you just read one more parenting book, you would finally get it right. You wouldn't. Because you are playing a game that is mathematically rigged against you. Let's look at the cold, hard numbers. To raise a single child from birth to their 18th birthday today will cost you, on average, $250,000. That is just the baseline. That does not include a college education. That does not account for the prime earning years you sacrifice when you are forced to step away from your career because childcare literally costs more than your mortgage. We wear our modern independence like a badge of honor. We buy our own cars, our own standalone houses with tall wooden fences, and we tell ourselves we have finally made it. But inside those heavily mortgaged houses, we are suffocating under the weight of our own autonomy. You are expected to work as if you do not have children, and raise children as if you do not have a job. You are forced to carry the physical, emotional, and financial weight of an entire community on the shoulders of just 1 or 2 people. It is a crushing, impossible standard. Your burnout is not a personal failure. It is a massive, systemic collapse. You are not tired because you are weak, you are tired because you are trying to replace the labor of a dozen people with your own 2 hands. But if human beings have been successfully raising babies for 300,000 years, how did we suddenly design a society where doing it costs $250,000 and your absolute sanity? The answer isn't that you are doing it wrong. It's that the village didn't just disappear, it was dismantled on purpose. For 99% of human history, raising a child inside a quiet, isolated, single-family home would not just have been considered strange. It would have been considered a literal death sentence. A mother was never meant to be alone in a room with a crying infant for 14 hours a day. A father was never meant to balance the sheer terror of providing for a family with the physical exhaustion of sleepless nights, utterly devoid of backup. For millennia, the monumental work of keeping a new human alive was radically diluted. Grandparents, aunts, neighbors, and older cousins formed a massive, overlapping web of constant, ambient support. If a meal was cooked, it was cooked for 10. If a toddler was being watched, they were being watched alongside 5 others. If a new parent was exhausted, there were literal dozens of arms waiting to take the baby. The burden of daily survival was distributed so widely, and so evenly, across the tribe that its crushing weight was rarely felt by a single spine. Care wasn't a luxury item you had to aggressively budget for on a late-night spreadsheet. It was the invisible, entirely free infrastructure of human existence. Then, the world industrialized. We packed our bags, left the extended family farm behind, and chased the promise of a standardized wage in the city. We traded the sprawling, messy, deeply interconnected village for the sleek, mobile, and highly efficient unit of the nuclear family. By the time the modern era arrived, we had perfected this isolation. The ultimate cultural dream became synonymous with physical separation. Success meant a detached house in the suburbs. A private, fenced-in lawn. A private washing machine. A private life. We spent decades building walls and erecting tall wooden fences to keep the outside world out, completely blind to the terrifying reality that we were simultaneously locking ourselves in. Privacy became our ultimate cultural god. But we worshipped it at the altar of our own sanity. Without the ambient, built-in support of the extended tribe, every single domestic task compounded. Every hour of childcare, every meal prepped, every mountain of laundry, and every midnight soothing session fell squarely onto the shoulders of just two people. And very often, just one. There was no aunt down the hall to hand the baby to. There was no grandmother sitting on the porch to watch the toddler while you simply took a shower. There was just you, four walls, and a culture silently telling you that if you couldn't handle the isolation, you were failing. We looked around our perfectly manicured cul-de-sacs and realized we had won the ultimate game of modern capitalism. We achieved peak self-sufficiency. But self-sufficiency is really just a polite, modern term for having absolutely nobody there to catch you when you fall. We successfully traded our shared backyards for two-car garages and absolute independence. But absolute independence has a hidden, compounding price tag. When you no longer have a community to support you for free, you are forced into a corner. You have to buy one. So, exactly how much is this invisible market extracting from your bank account right now? When the walls went up and the extended family moved away, the monumental, back-breaking labor of raising a human being did not magically disappear. The sheer volume of hours required to feed, bathe, soothe, and protect a child remained exactly the same. The need for the village never vanished. It just left a massive, gaping void. And the market eagerly stepped in to fill it. The village wasn't destroyed, it was commodified. It was chopped up into individual, hyper-specialized services, slapped with a premium price tag, and sold back to desperate parents who had absolutely no other choice but to buy it. Think about the daily reality of your own life. You do not have a sister or a cousin living down the street to watch your toddler while you work. So, you rent one. We call it daycare. And in many places, renting that fragmented piece of the village now costs more than annual in-state college tuition. You do not have a grandmother sleeping in the next room to help soothe a colicky newborn. So, you hire a pediatric sleep consultant at $300 an hour to tell you over a Zoom call how to get your baby to close their eyes. You do not have a communal hearth or a shared neighborhood kitchen where the burden of cooking is distributed. So, you download an app, pay a delivery fee, a service fee, and a driver tip, just to have a stranger leave a lukewarm meal on your doorstep because you are physically too exhausted to turn on the stove. Look closely at the modern household budget. It is not a reflection of lavish spending or financial irresponsibility. It is a desperate ledger of survival outsourcing. The lactation consultant. The postpartum doula. The weekend babysitter. The grocery delivery subscription. The screen time apps we use as digital pacifiers so we can just answer a single phone call in peace. Society loves to shame modern parents for these expenses. They tell you that relying on these conveniences makes you lazy, indulgent, or somehow less dedicated than the generations before you. That is a lie. You are not buying luxury. You are buying the bare minimum infrastructure of human survival. You are paying a premium out of your own pocket for the exact same physical and mental relief that was once provided for free, simply by existing within a tribe. The math of modern parenthood is brutal. Millions of families are spending 20, 30, or even 40% of their gross income just to safely store their children while they go to work. It is an economic Ouroboros, a snake devouring its own tail. You are working relentless hours to pay for the childcare you require in order to keep working. The system has convinced us that we are empowered consumers making independent lifestyle choices. In reality, we are captive buyers. We have taken the most fundamental, ancient human interactions, care, nourishment, and shared responsibility, and turned them into luxury goods. We are bleeding ourselves dry just to reach the baseline of survival our ancestors were granted simply by existing in a tribe. We are trapped in a market that sells us expensive solutions to a problem it created. But if buying the village is mathematically unsustainable for the vast majority of families, what happens when the money, and the parents, completely run out? What happens when the money runs out is simple: you hit the wall. It happens quietly at first. A snapped tone over an unwashed dish in the sink. A moment of paralyzing numbness when the baby starts crying again at 2 in the morning. A solitary cry in the front seat of your car in the driveway, taking 5 extra minutes before you force yourself to put on a brave face and walk through the front door. This is the psychological tax of total isolation. And it is a tax almost every single modern parent pays in complete silence. We have built a society where burnout isn't an unexpected crisis, it is the baseline expectation. When you force human beings to combine full-time, demanding economic labor with full-time, unassisted domestic caretaking, the human machine will eventually break. It is not a matter of if. It is purely a matter of when. And yet, when that inevitable breaking point arrives, the system does something truly insidious. It turns your exhaustion inward. It convinces you that your suffering is a personal character flaw. If you just had more patience, if you were just a little more disciplined, if you could just master time management, you wouldn't feel like you are falling apart. So you buy another parenting book. You download another organization app. You double down on the performance of parenthood, spending energy you don't have and money you can't afford, trying to optimize your way out of a structural collapse. This guilt is not an accident. Guilt is the most profitable business model on earth. A guilty, exhausted parent is the ultimate consumer. They will spend anything, try anything, and endure anything if they believe it will shield their child from the consequences of a broken world. The dirty secret of the modern economy is that the hyper-isolated nuclear family was never designed for your personal well-being. It was designed for maximum economic consumption. One large extended family living together only needs one washing machine, one lawnmower, one kitchen, and 0 paid childcare. But break that tribe up into 4 separate nuclear families, and suddenly you have created 4 distinct sets of consumers who must purchase 4 of everything, and spend thousands buying back the care they used to give each other for free. It is a brilliant financial structure. It is a catastrophic human one. The breakdown you are experiencing is not a bug in the code of modern life. It is a feature. You are taking the physical, emotional, and social labor that was once distributed across 50 human beings and trying to compress it into the calendar of 2 exhausted adults. It is physically impossible. You are not losing your mind because you are weak. You are losing your mind because you are attempting the impossible every single morning when your alarm goes off. The guilt you feel every single night isn't proof of your failure, it is a symptom of a structurally bankrupt system designed to make you feel alone. Once you realize the isolated nuclear family is a failed economic experiment, you can finally stop playing a rigged game. The question is, if we can't go back in time, and we can no longer afford to buy the village, how do we build a new one from scratch? We cannot rewind the clock. We are not going to abandon our careers, tear down our cities, and move back to multi-generational agrarian farms. But we also cannot afford to keep paying a premium to outsource our basic survival. So, there is only one viable path forward. We have to build the village from scratch. We have to architect a micro-community. This is not a utopian fantasy, and it does not require you to move to a commune. It requires something much harder. It requires you to completely shatter the modern illusion of self-sufficiency. You have to trade your performative independence for radical vulnerability. The first step to building a modern village is admitting you actually need one. You have to look at the parents at the playground, the couple across the street, or your co-workers with kids the exact same age, and you have to tell the truth. You have to admit that you are exhausted, that your budget is stretched to the breaking point, and that you cannot do this alone anymore. Vulnerability is the only currency that buys real community. Once you drop the mask, you can start pooling your resources. Look at the sheer, redundant waste of the isolated nuclear family. On a single suburban block, on any given Tuesday evening, there are 20 exhausted parents standing in 20 separate kitchens, cooking 20 mediocre meals for their individual toddlers. It is madness. What if you texted one of those neighbors and made a pact? On Tuesdays and Thursdays, you cook a double portion and walk half of it across the street. On Wednesdays and Fridays, they do the exact same for you. Overnight, you just bought back 2 evenings a week of your life, and it cost you absolutely $0. Apply this aggressive sharing to everything. Start a babysitting co-op instead of hiring an expensive agency. Find 3 other families you trust, create a shared calendar, and trade hours instead of currency. You watch their kids on a Saturday morning so they can sleep, they watch yours on a Friday night so you can remember what your partner's face looks like across a quiet dinner table. Organize rotating school drop-offs. Share the expensive lawn equipment and the outgrown baby gear. Create a neighborhood text thread where the only rule is that no request for help is ever considered a burden. We have been deeply conditioned to believe that asking for a favor is an imposition. That is a lie sold to you by a culture that wants you to pull out your credit card instead of knocking on a neighbor's door. In a healthy micro-community, asking for help is not a weakness. It is a mutual survival pact. It is the exact mechanism that gives the people around you permission to need you, too. You have to lower the drawbridge. You have to let people see your messy living room. You have to stop viewing your home as a private, heavily guarded fortress and start treating it as a shared hub of mutual resilience. The village is no longer a safety net you are simply born into, it is a rebellion you have to architect. You now have the blueprint to stop surviving and start building. But in a culture completely addicted to the illusion of independence, who will be the first family in your neighborhood brave enough to open their front door, admit they are drowning, and ask to share the load?